Every Sunday, as we navigate through bustling malls and streets, we always see groups of Filipino and Indonesian women seated on the floor or strolling by. So, who are they? They are the foreign domestic helpers, and their presence is both prominent and yet overlooked. Behind their smiles and joy they radiate lies a story of resilience amidst adversity. But how many of us truly comprehend the disparities they face? Our group is thereby to dig deep into the situation, shed light on the difficulties these helpers experience, and possibly suggest ways to tackle the problem. With Hong Kong's development into a global city in the 1980s, local families developed a dual-income approach to their careers and employed domestic helpers from Indonesia and Philippines to take care of their children, elderly, and doing housework. They now make up about 5% of the population in Hong Kong, yet still face much stigma in their lives, from traditional racial stereotypes to mistreatment. We will explore the reasons that make this group vulnerable and possible solutions to change the situation. Considering the dimension of poverty, most workers come from lower-class families where their parents are farmers or physical laborers. They cannot afford tertiary education for their daughters, and as a result, they have no choice but to do jobs of servitude or help on their parents' farm. Thus, domestic workers choose to work in Hong Kong as the wages are much higher than in their home countries. Even so, it is hard for them to break the cycle of poverty as their minimum wage is less than 5,000 per month, which they mostly send to their families as financial support. They are often the sole provider of their household and their children's education, which leads to them leading poor lives in Hong Kong and no consuming power. This proves the importance of education in helping a person out of poverty, as they can only continue to work in lowly paid labor jobs without educational qualification. Moreover, these workers face inequality while they work in Hong Kong. There is a severe lack of autonomy in their lives due to dependency on employers because of their position as stay-in helpers. The non-stop physical and emotional labor of domestic helpers differentiates them from other workers and make them vulnerable to exploitation. They have been mandated by law since 2003 to live in employers' home, which often leads to unreasonable living conditions, such as coupons or even bathrooms. Hong Kong also has no legal legislation on domestic helpers' working hours, and some must work more than 12 hours a day. Essentially, they're forced to choose between supporting their families and their own well-being.
So, who is interested in keeping the situation as it is and who wants it to be changed? First, domestic workers. Most domestic workers want the government to address these unfair conditions. Ariana Celestia Ninzi suffered from severe abuse from her employer in 2013, and this is what she said.
As human being, I can forgive Lawantong and her family. But justice must be upheld.
Recently, a former domestic worker, Annie Lestari, advocated for governments to pay more attention to mistreatment cases.
After years of being voiceless and invisible, we, the migrants, are finally welcome here to speak for ourselves.
Earlier this year, a group of workers staged a protest outside the Labour Department demanding to stop discrimination. These incidents show that domestic workers are tired of unequal working conditions and are fighting for the situation to improve. Second, NGOs. NGOs want this situation to be changed. These institutions mostly aim to protect the rights of domestic helpers. For example, Help for Domestic Helpers will provide legal consultation, education on rights and responsibility, shelter, and mental health support for domestic helpers.
The message for domestic workers in Hong Kong is that please don't be afraid. You working here, you have been protected by the law in Hong Kong.
Open Door is one of the NGOs. It is dedicated to improving domestic helpers' working and living environment via educational and cultural activities. It also wants to help establish an understanding and respect relationships between employers and domestic workers. These NGOs are trying to improve and empower domestic helpers to face the inequality situations in Hong Kong and try to help them to integrate into society. Third, employers. For those who want to keep the situation, they are concerned about the increase in costs associated with improving the wages and working conditions of domestic helpers. They may worry about their ability to afford higher salaries and see these changes as a burden on their household finances. Also, some employers may hold prejudiced views or stereotypes about domestic helpers, that they are poor and they should earn such low income. Moreover, some employers may be unaware of the challenges faced by domestic helpers or the extent of income inequality in Hong Kong. They may not fully grasp the impact of low wages, long working hours, and limited legal protections. On the flip side, some employers have a strong sense of ethics and believe in treating all individuals with fairness, dignity, and respect. They believe that workers deserve equal treatment and improved working conditions. Besides, employers can develop personal positive relationships with their domestic helpers, just like how this employer says. Lastly, some employers understand that providing fair wages and a supportive environment can lead to better job satisfaction and loyalty. They believe that investing in their well-being ultimately benefits both parties involved.
After having understood the stakeholders related to the poverty and inequalities faced by foreign domestic helpers in Hong Kong, we are now introducing some specific goals and targets for alleviating the unequal circumstance of domestic workers. Goal 1. increase domestic helpers' salaries by government. First, our goal is increase domestic helpers' salaries, and the government's efforts can achieve it. This goal is also related to SDG 1 of no poverty. Although the statistics have shown that the government increased domestic helpers' salaries in recent years, their salaries are still far from equal. The current minimum salary for domestic helpers is 4,870 Hong Kong dollar per month only. However, the average salaries of Hong Kong workers is 36,000 Hong Kong dollar. Hence, the government can regularly review and increase the minimum wage specifically for domestic helpers, which can narrow the wage gap between domestic helpers and other Hong Kong workers. It could increase domestic workers' low socioeconomic status in Hong Kong and personal poverty level, and change the public's feeling that domestic workers are inferior and treat them unfairly. This minimum wage should be set at a level that can meet Hong Kong's cost of living and inflation rate. This can help domestic work helpers feel that they are being treated justly in Hong Kong and the wages are fair, reasonable, and livable for domestic helpers.
Our second goal is to improve domestic workers' poor working environment and unfair treatment to avoid and lower various types of abuses faced by domestic helpers. The authority should enhance monitoring and enforcement of employers' behavior in different aspects, such as harassment, abuse, food supply, and working and sleeping environment. Ensure compliance with labor laws and regulations protecting domestic helpers. For example, the government can set up an independent department to regularly inspect domestic workers' workplaces to know about treatment conditions and conduct evaluations. This department can also handle disputes between employees and employers and conduct negotiations for both parties. The government could strengthen regulations to protect and ensure the rights and welfare of domestic helpers by setting minimum wage standards and regulating working hours. This helps lower the poverty level and lower the chances of facing mistreatment. Employers should treat domestic helpers with dignity and respect, providing them with fair wages, reasonable working hours, and adequate rest days. Employers should not discriminate against the helpers. They should treat them as a family member and provide them with a safe working environment. Employers can even provide workers with regular physical checkups to ensure that they have good health conditions. Under current Hong Kong law, employers only need to provide foreign domestic helpers with one body check upon their arrival in Hong Kong. The third goal is to increase domestic workers' knowledge to Hong Kong labor laws. Intermediary companies should be required to explain Hong Kong's rights and responsibilities towards domestic workers before they come to work in Hong Kong. Agencies have to explain and declare the relevant legal provisions to the domestic helpers and inform them of the channels for recourse. Domestic helpers can share their own personal stories. Domestic helpers can educate themselves about their rights, responsibilities, and available resources to avoid suffering unequal treatment due to ignorance of Hong Kong laws. Searching online resources or inquiring directly with the Labour Department. They can join support groups or regularly attend legal advice talks held by NGOs or the government to enhance their knowledge of domestic helpers' laws in Hong Kong. Our fourth goal is to help domestic helpers integrate into society. NGOs can offer cultural workshops and Cantonese language classes to empower domestic helpers and help them integrate into society. NGOs also carry an essential role in monitoring and pressurizing the government to fill policy loopholes. They can use social platforms to raise money and protect domestic helpers' rights. Let domestic helpers feel that they are followed in society.
Government should ensure that foreign domestic helpers have a safe and clean environment to rest and enjoy holidays. For example, during holidays, most foreign domestic helpers usually go to parks and footbridges, sitting on the dirty underground to eat and chat. However, foreign domestic helpers should have the same dignity as local workers. Goal 5. Increase freedom in engaging policy advocacy. A regular public discussion forum should be created, promoting dialogues between stakeholders to find mutually beneficial solutions. The general public, including foreign domestic helpers and representatives of the consulates in Hong Kong of the foreign domestic helpers' home countries, can engage in policy advocacy by voicing their concerns to policymakers and advocating for reforms like addressing income inequality for domestic helpers. This can involve writing to elected representatives, signing petitions, or participating in public consultations, which can enhance foreign domestic helpers' discourse power and opportunities to fight for their own rights, reducing inequalities.
We were born in Hong Kong, an affluent city. In contrast, our beloved foreign domestic helpers were born in a relatively poor country, which forced them to work outside, leaving their hometown and loved ones. We paid to hire them to work in a respectful and grateful manner. Without them, families with children or the elderly may face lots of difficulties in living. It is high time we start taking a look at the difficulties they face and find a way to help them.